Namaste everyone, it's the Chess Puzzler. Thank you so much for coming back to my channel today. We are going to cover the second installment of the chapter number 2 from Grandmaster Yasser Seirawan's amazing book on chess endgames. It's called Winning Chess Endings. In the first installment, video 2.1, Queen versus Pawn Endgames Part 1, we saw how we have to play to win when we have a queen while the opponent has a pawn by preventing its promotion or making its promotion completely useless. And now we are going to see how do we have to play when we have a queen and a pawn while the opponent has a queen as well. Grandmaster Yasser describes that queen and pawn versus queen endings are notoriously difficult because the defending side is often able to give a whole series of checks driving the king around the empty board. While the superior side is trying to promote its passer, the twin tasks of escaping from a perpetual check and promoting the pawn are immensely difficult. And because of that difficulty, Grandmaster Yasser has limited the discussion to those positions where passed pawns are just one square away from queening, as we see in this case as well. Of course, it might be extremely difficult to cover each and every scenario where we have these pieces on the board, but we are going to go through some common examples and recurring themes that we have seen for the defender as well as the attacker, and and encourage you to explore the other possibilities based on the concepts that we learned today. The pattern that we see on the screen right now is a study by composers and endgame pioneers Joseph Kling and Bernhard Horowitz, and it was published in 1851. In this pattern, in this placement, we see that black's king is misplaced. The best square for the defending king is directly in front of the passer, which is going to be this square, where he can hope to win the pawn. In a case like this, in which the king is blockading, the defender usually has no problem drawing the position. And this brings up our first principle in these endings. And the principle goes something like this. If the defending king is unable to stabilize itself in front of the passer, the best solution is to get the defending king as far away from the passer as possible. So we're talking about something like this. Without further ado, let's see how white can win this game in the best possible way. We'll start with something like queen b4. Now, one of the paradoxes of queen endings that Grandmaster Yasser Seirawan explains is that the superior side is often better off making a quiet queen move than trying a forceful series of checks. After queen b4, black's king is frozen in place. You see, the black king cannot go anywhere at all. All of these moves will be illegal moves. Therefore, black's queen must maintain the pin against the b7 pawn, or the under promotion b8 converting to a knight will be b8 converting to knight will fork the queen and the king, and white will easily win. So to maintain this pin, black moves to queen h1 as far away as possible. Black takes the best defense to avoid a number of other attractive losses. It's a funny way how Yasuo Saravan puts this. Retreating the queen along this diagonal is not that easy. Let's see why Yasuo Saravan feels so. Had queen played something like queen d5, queen a4 check, king b6, followed by queen b3 check, queen takes on b3, and this wins because it's a check, and the moment the king moves, the black queen is ours. So it seems for a move that this was a queen b3 was a stupid move, sacrificing the queen while having a winning position. But the idea behind that was promotion and then taking the queen back on b3. Now instead of queen d5, had black played something like queen f3, for example, then once again queen a4, king b6, and queen b3 wins once again. If black moves somewhere to safety, then white takes the black's queen. So black is actually forced to take the queen, which will be followed by a promotion. Black moves, and black surely wins. We'll see one more possibility, one more variation in this case. If the black queen moves to, say, g2, in this case, we have queen a3, king b6, and queen b2. So the idea is the same. The black queen will have to take, followed by a skewer, winning the black queen back, while being one entire queen up. So to avoid all of this, after queen b4, a quiet waiting move, queen goes to h1, followed by queen a3, king b6, king b2, king c7, and queen h2. Once again, the idea is the same. If you already saw that this is what white is trying, then just pat yourself on the back. It was an amazing move. Queen is forced to take because if black doesn't take, then the white will take the queen and get one more queen in the next move. And we get a queen, nevertheless. And voila, it's going to be a skewer all over again. One of the things that we learn from this position is that white is able to queen only because of the black king. It is completely misplaced, and like we said, if the black king cannot be somewhere in front of the passer, black king has to be somewhere far away so that black queen can handle the business right here. Let's continue and look at another example. With the king out of the way, as we can see, the black king is far away from the action going around over here. The defender can exploit this position to his advantage. This position in the screen that we see right now was published in 1763, which was like 13 years before the United States of America even came into independence. And more than 200 years later, this analysis is still correct. Black draws by forcing white to queen his pawn. Confused? You'll not be anymore after you see the series of moves that black plays. Queen goes to h4, queen h7, and now queen plays queen d8, g8. We get a queen. White achieves his aim of promoting his pawn to a queen, but it's not enough because black is able to establish a perpetual check. Do you see it? It's queen f6, queen at g7, queen h4, and you can see this is definitely going to be a draw. No matter which queen moves in, if it's this one, then queen goes back to d8 and it's check. It's f6. This will keep on going until there's a check. So despite having two queens, white just cannot win this game. And the only reason this is possible is because at the starting of this position, black king was far, far away from the queening pawn that white has. Let's look at one more example of queen and pawn versus queen endings. Here, the white passer, the d pawn, is one of the best that he could have. Like other central pawns, it offers white's king good shielding opportunities. Black, for his part, is happy with the placement of his king because once again, black king is far away from the promoting pawn, so that's a good place for the pawn king to be completely out of the way. This placement, however, is not a salient feature of the position. The key factor is the poor position of black's queen. It's at d8, and ideally the black king should have been there in front of the passer, but it's the black queen limiting her power, limiting her powers considerably. In general, the queen makes a very poor blockade. Well, because when the queen has the potential of moving in so many different directions, if you install a queen right in front of the passer, you are seriously limiting the powers that she has. So the principle to keep in mind over here is whenever the defender's queen is forced to blockade a passer on the promoting square, the game is lost. Now let's see how white goes up to win this game. Black is going to be unable to create any perpetual check opportunities because his blockading queen is limited in its movements. As the defender in such endings, you have to fight to keep your queen as active as possible. Resist using your queen as a blockader. We'll start with something like queen d6. That's a check. King goes to a2. That's going to be followed by queen f7. White king moves in such a way as to prevent black's queen from giving a single check. Now the black queen cannot go to f6, cannot go to f8, cannot go to e8, cannot go to g8, and cannot go to e7. All of these squares are protected by the white pieces. Therefore, white is not going to get any check at all. So the black moves its king to b3. Queen goes to e6. That's a check. King c2 and queen e7. The blockading queen is forced to move, and with that, the promoting pawn wins the game. If the black takes, for example, then we take back, and the black king will not be able to reach this pawn in time before it promotes itself to a queen. Having learned about the topics 1, 2, 3, and 4, do you feel ready to learn how to deal with the most difficult queen endings where there are multiple pawns? That's exactly what we are going to do right now. And thanks to the brilliant explanation given by the Grandmaster Yasser Seirawan, we are going to find this concept much easier once you learn what it's all about. In such endings, the positions are so complex that you will have to calculate each position for its unique characteristics. Still, you can help your play by utilizing a few principles. Principle number one: queens are at their most powerful when centralized. Principle number two: the safety of the king is paramount. Principle number three: the most important pawn is a passer that is well advanced. And the final principle number four: it is important to be able to recognize perpetual check patterns. Before we tackle the difficult subject of queen endings with a number of pawns, you should familiarize yourself with two very common perpetual check patterns, the one that we see on the screen right now and the one that I'm going to show you next. In these patterns, white's threat of promoting his passed pawn is unstoppable. The black's only saving grace is a perpetual check. As we can see, black's pawn is far away, and if black queen goes all the way on this side of the board to protect the passer, then black is just going to lose the queen and the game. So the only way how black can render this promotion useless is by setting up a perpetual check machine. So the standard: queen e1, king h2, queen h4, king g1, and queen e1. This perpetual check perpetual check mechanism is going to be the game saver for black, as black cannot expect anything better than that. And in this particular pattern, we'll see that queen d1, king g2, queen f3, king g1, queen d1. This repetition of moves is going to be the saving grace for black. If you for a second just removed these pawns, both the g pawns that we have, then in that case, queen d1, king g2, queen g4, this is going to be a very common theme for a perpetual check for black. So although white's pawn is just one step away from promotion and actually checkmating the black king, this perpetual check system is going to bring black out from the lion's den. All the positions now, starting with this one, we are going to have to answer a series of questions before making a move. As you can see, in this case, we are 2 pawns down as white. And although this particular position is about 110 years old, it's still relevant as far as queen versus queen and pawn endings are concerned. What do you play as white in order to move? Remember, the black pawns are moving in this direction. Yeah. So we have to try to find a move that helps white salvage the situation. We start with something like queen e5. That will be followed by queen g5 because if black played something like pawn push to g5, can you see a checkmate in two? Queen e1, and the only legal move is queen g3 followed by queen takes on g3. That's checkmate. So to avoid that, after queen e7, queen g5, and this will be followed by queen e4 check. Then we have queen g4, and I'm sure you realize where this is going. It's a threefold repetition that is going to lead to a draw. So, despite being two pawns down, white has the fantastic visualization power of knowing how to deliver a perpetual check, allowing no room for black to move its pawns and therefore draw the game. Let's take another example, which was published by a Russian grandmaster in 1962. White has one passed pawn and is also one pawn up. It clearly seems to be in a winning position, but how do you proceed in order to make sure that all the moves are the best ones, which will not allow a single opportunity for black to come up in this game? You start with pushing the passed pawn. If the queen takes, then queen takes back, and white definitely is in a better place. So one thing that you keep in mind in such positions is that in queen endings, one of the things that is of crucial importance is to try to weaken the pawns around the king. How do we do that? We have to try to make certain moves, maybe check moves or maybe forcing moves or the only legal possible moves, in order to force the opponent to move the pawns away from the king. Let's see how we can do that. After c7, queen will try to cover the c8 square so that when white promotes, the queen can take back. Instead of defending that pawn from c5, white tries to force black to move its pawn. And it does that by playing queen to e4 check. Okay. Uh, let's see what would happen if you played queen c5. Then queen will simply go to c8. We learned earlier that yes, blockading a pawn is not the best idea. But in this case, it works because white is also stuck with this pawn. White queen cannot do much while not being very close to this pawn. So both the queens are stuck, and now it's going to be a battle of king and two pawns versus king and two pawns, which might not be as decisive as it should be. Then this will be followed by queen d6, staying very close to the c7 pawn. Queen goes to f5, once again making sure that the square on c8 is covered, and this is eventually going to be very easy for black to deliver a perpetual check somewhere or the other. So this is not going to turn out very well for white, which is why to avoid all of this complication, white plays queen e4 check, which is going to be followed by g6. So we did force black to move its pawn. Queen c2. Now what are we doing here? The powerful dual purpose move. White is prepared to answer queen d6 with g3, which like queen d6 and g3. So we are ready for that. And at the same time, we still have the threat of promoting the pawn. So the queen will have to go back to this point and lose tempi. So therefore, white plays queen c2, followed by queen c8 and queen c5. Why are we playing this move? We are playing this move to take advantage of the broken pawn shield. So the idea is for the queen to jump to e7 and deliver a check. So white plays h5. Queen goes to e7 as we thought, king h6. And now is a key moment. What would you play? Would you play g3? Would you play g4? Would you play h4? Would you move the king somewhere? Sorry, queen somewhere? The best move over here is h4. If you wanted to play something like queen d8, if you thought that black would simply take and we would promote on d8, then it's fair. But what if black played queen to f5? There are there is no way we can actually answer to this set, because if you think that you do something like pawn promotes and queen e5 check, then you see where this is going, right? The pawn moves here, and it's going to be a continuous perpetual check given by black. So despite having two queens, white is going to be completely helpless because black will deliver a draw. Therefore, pawn promotion or going to queen to d8 and expecting black to trade is not the right move. The right move over here is pawn goes on h4. This choice confines the black king and gives white king a bit more breathing room, because now white has some squares to go to, while black king is completely devastated. It really cannot go anywhere at all. All the three squares are protected by white pieces. This can be followed by something like queen h8. Now, being on the blockading square, as we learned earlier, limits the black's options. The active try is something like queen a6, queen f8 check. The king has only one place to go, that's h7, and then we promote. And it's going to be too easy for white to move, or white to win. To prevent all that, after h4, black plays queen h8. Now queen goes to e3. Black is going to be chased back to a more vulnerable square, which is king h7. And now queen e6. The idea is for white to promote while protecting that square. So black will lose its queen and white will retain a queen. This can be followed by queen d4. You can notice that the white is making it very difficult for black to deliver a perpetual check. So what will black do now? It's going to be queen e7 check, and white is basically taking advantage of the move king h7 to reposition his queen. King goes to h6, queen g5, queen h7, and now we have a queen. We have basically forced black to move its king and queen in such a way that white ends up with two queens, while black has no way to deliver a perpetual check, let alone a single check. And now we are going to continue to the last topic of the queen and pawn endings that is most awaited for this particular video, and it's a game between Bulgarian Grandmaster Vasilin Topalov versus the world's highest rated player at that time, who was Grandmaster Garry Kasparov. This was the game was played in round seven of the famous Linares tournament, which is held annually in Spain. And this tournament markets itself as the Wimbledon of chess, because year after year it features a round robin of world's highest rated players. This game was played in 1999, and it teaches us a lot about the queen and pawn endings. And I hope you are extremely excited for it, as I was when I read this particular game. The position that we see on the screen right now was reached after Black's 43rd move. White, who is an exchange down, meaning a rook for a bishop or a rook for a knight, has erected a near fortress-like position, having closed all the files to keep Black's rooks at bay. As you can see, White's pawns are superiorly placed right now, and also the bishop, which is completely protected. It does not allow any entry to Black. And don't forget, Black is Garry Kasparov himself. So it's going to be super exciting to find out how Black just cuts through all of these defenses and breaks down all the walls of this mighty fortress and win the game. Looking closely at this position, we can say that white's rook is also frozen, right? If white captures, then black gets the open file, and it's going to be much easier for black to deliver checks and break the fortress right away. White's king must remain near the center to prevent black's king from encroaching. Right? If it wanders too far to the queen side, then black will trade rooks on the g5 square, and the newly minted passer, either the h5 pawn or the f5 pawn, would scurry to promotion. So the idea is that the white king has to be somewhere here, so the black does not enter this area and provide support to the black pawns until the promotion square. The situation obliges white's bishop to move. Yep. So if you cannot move the rook, if you cannot move the pawns, if you cannot move the king, then the only possible piece that you have to compulsorily move is going to be the white bishop. A peculiar series of circumstances that allows black's king to scoot around the board at will. So in this case, however, white starts with c3. It figures that it still has one another move that it can make right now. That is going to be followed by king c6. Unable to make progress in the center, black takes another approach to penetrate the white's fortress. Just wait and watch. It's going to be so exciting. I'm thrilled like a small child right now. I'll show you how this game develops. This is going to be followed by king f3, king b5, bishop to c5, king a4, bishop to d4, rook to d7, king e3, king b3, and king e2. The game has moved to this particular position after 49 moves. Black has achieved his maximum and now needs a breakthrough. Black has repositioned its pieces. If you remember, the black's king was on the d5 square. It has moved all the way over here to b3. It is already in the white's territory, but how is that going to help black? Black plays, Black plays rook takes on g5. Why? Because black wants to break open the position, break down the walls of this fortress that Topalov has created, so that Kasparov can make an entry with its rook and also take down all these pawns while helping the black pawns to promote. This is going to be followed by f takes on g5, rook takes on g4. Oh yes, black sacrifices a rook for a bishop. So this is what it's called as an exchange down. This is going to be followed by c takes on d4. Obviously, you need the rook back, and now c3. Suddenly, black has a passed pawn, and this is going to be followed by g6, c2, g7, and we have a queen. But Topalov has a queen too. This game has now transformed into our topical queen ending, as we can see on the screen. There are two queens on the board, and there are several pawns on both the sides of the board. It's time to take stock. How did Gary Kasparov approach this ending? First and foremost, he counted the material and realized he was a pawn down. Not good at all. However, he made a few other evaluations because, come on, it's Gary Kasparov. Black's extremely active king is the key. Right? White's king is super passive, but Black's king is quite active because it's very close to the opponent pawns. It's very close to the queen, and it can easily travel to the center of the board without white being an interference. It can create checkmating threats by combining the threat of capturing white pawns with the idea of working with the queen. The next trump is the passer. Which side has one? Can you guess? You don't have to guess. Can you see on the board and find out which side has a passer? Of all the pawns in the board, black's f5 pawn is the most dangerous passer. White has one too, but it's not going to be quite helpful because black pawn can just take back. But black's f5 pawn, that's going to be detrimental to white's position. Therefore, despite being a pawn down, black has two key trumps, the better king and the f5 passer. This is going to be followed by queen to c4 check. And once again, it's a dual purpose move. Kasparov defends the e6 pawn while playing to capture with check the white's pawns. White will be forced to go to e3 and will play king c3. Black renews the threat to the d4 pawn, forcing white's queen to take a decisive posture, and therefore white plays queen d8, followed by queen d3, king f4, and king d2. This was a key move. White had hoped to escape with his king via the g5 square, not only to avoid queen checks, but also to munch the h5 pawn, and so gain his own passer. There's one little question for you over here. Why do you think did did not grab the d4 pawn? That's right here. This would have been a check and also would have forced white to trade the queens. If you can find the answer to that question, then please mention those in the comments. Now this is going to be followed by king f3, queen d1. This fine move repositions the queen. Black wants to push his f-pawn up the board to make a new queen while creating checkmating threats. At the moment, white's king is blockading and has to be pushed aside. And that's what white does. White king moves to e3. White obviously could not step forward with his king by playing something like king f4, because then we have queen g4 with the check, king e3, and then f4. So this is exactly what black is trying to do. And if Topalov allows Kasparov to make such a move, then the game is going to be over much, much, much sooner. Because once again, come on, it's Topalov, right? And this will be followed by king f2, queen g3, king f1, queen, sorry, it's going to be queen d3 check, king g1, queen e3 check, king f1, and f3. This is going to be a completely winning game because no matter what white plays, black has a threat of queen e2 and then queen g2 checkmate. So to avoid all of this, after king, so to avoid all of this, king moves to e3, which is going to be followed by queen g1, king goes to e2, queen g2, and king e3. This play has brought us to this position after move 61, where Garry Kasparov delivers a telling blow, and that's f4 check. Topalov resigns as soon as he sees this lovely finale. He is forced to play king takes on f4, and that's going to be followed by king d3 with a deadly threat of queen g4 checkmate. Right? So if say black or if white plays something like queen g5, then we have queen f2, which once again is a checkmate. Did you see this coming? I had not, I'll be honest with you. So this game fragment contains an important lesson. When a king is able to make it behind the enemy lines, quite often the enemy pawns act as a pawn shield. If you were to replay this fragment and extract a few pawns from the board, the d4 and the b4 pawns, for example, then black's king would have been much more vulnerable to checks. But luckily, well, Garry Kasparov made use of enemy pawns, not just his own pawns, and that's why he is Garry Kasparov. Of all the endings, I have found that queen endings are the most difficult and complex. I encourage you to practice this ending, but I suggest that you do so in the context of a whole game. Merely playing queen ending positions will not give you an appreciation for the challenging and beautiful nature of this particular ending. And with that, we come to a close on the queen and pawn endings chapter. This is going to be followed by a really, really long chapter on rook endings, on which I'm going to start creating videos very soon and post it for your benefit. If you are learning from my videos, if you think that my content is rich enough for you to improve your chess, then I request you to please like this video, share as much as possible, share it with all your friends, colleagues, and family who are interested in improving their chess. And I promise to keep doing better with every single content that I create for you. And finally, do not forget to subscribe on my channel. It's a humble request. It helps me, it motivates me, it inspires me to create more content for you. And well, I'll see you next time. It's the Chess Puzzler signing out.